The cool October breeze rustled through the apple trees. As Robert walked slowly around his backyard garden, at 67 years old, he had spent the last 15 years perfecting this little piece of heaven. Every tree, every bush, every flower bed had been planted with love and care. But something was wrong, very wrong, for the past week. His prized apples had been disappearing. Not just any apples, but the special ones he had grown from rare seeds. The red ones with golden spots that took him 3 years to perfect. The sweet yellow ones that reminded him of his childhood. Someone was taking them, one by one. During the night, Robert had worked hard on this garden to let a thief ruin it. Tonight, he was going to catch whoever was stealing his precious fruit. He put on his old brown jacket and grabbed his flashlight from the kitchen drawer. The sun had just set, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Soon it would be completely dark, and the thief would probably come back. Robert found a good hiding spot behind his tool shed. From here, he could see the whole apple section of his garden. He turned off his flashlight and waited. The minutes felt like hours. His knees started to ache from crouching, but he stayed put. An owl hooted somewhere in the distance. A cat ran across his neighbor's fence. The wind made the apple tree branches dance and sway. But no thief appeared. Just when Robert was about to give up and go inside, he heard something, a tiny sound like a mouse scratching. But it was coming from his apple trees, not the ground. He turned on his flashlight and pointed it toward the sound. What he saw made him freeze completely. There, on one of the lower branches, was the smallest person he had ever seen. She couldn't have been more than 8 inches tall. Her skin was pale blue, almost like moonlight. Her eyes were huge and dark, taking up half of her tiny face. Her hair was silver and seemed to glow in the flashlight beam. The little being was using what looked like a miniature rope and hook to carefully pick one of his apples. The apple was almost as big as she was. She handled it with great care, as if it was the most precious thing in the world. Robert's heart pounded in his chest. Was he dreaming? Had he fallen asleep behind the shed? He blinked hard, but the tiny girl was still there. She wore clothes that looked like they were made from leaves and flower petals. On her back was a small pack that seemed to be woven from grass. She moved with incredible grace, never making a sound as she worked. Robert watched in amazement as she secured the apple to her rope system. She was so focused on her task that she hadn't noticed his flashlight yet. But then, as she prepared to lower the apple to the ground, she looked up. Their eyes met across the garden. The tiny girl's face filled with pure terror. She dropped her rope, and the apple fell to the ground. With a soft thud, she pressed herself against the tree branch, shaking like a leaf in the wind. Robert's first thought was to reach out and grab her. His second thought was to call someone, anyone, to witness this incredible discovery. But as he looked at her frightened face, a third thought came to him. She looked hungry. Not just regular hungry, but the kind of hungry that comes from not eating for days. Her tiny frame seemed even smaller somehow, and her clothes hung loose on her body. The apple she had dropped was now rolling away from the tree. She watched it go with such sadness in her enormous eyes that Robert felt his heart break a little. This wasn't some mischievous thief trying to cause trouble. This was someone desperate for food. Slowly, very slowly, Robert put down his flashlight. He didn't want to scare her any more than she already was. He got down on his knees in the grass, making himself as small as possible. The tiny girl watched, his every move, ready to run at any second. Robert's voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke. "Are you hungry, little one?" The girl tilted her head, clearly surprised by his gentle tone. She seemed to understand his words, even though she didn't answer right away. Robert pointed to the fallen apple, then back to her. "Is that for you to eat?" The girl nodded slowly, still watching him with those huge, cautious eyes. Robert smiled, the kind of warm smile he used to give his own grandchildren when they visited. "You don't have to be afraid of me. I'm not going to hurt you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small pocket knife. The girl tensed up, but Robert just used it to cut a slice from another apple that had fallen nearby earlier that day. "Here, he said, placing the apple slice on the ground between them. This one's bigger and sweeter. The tiny girl stared at the offering, then at Robert's face. She was clearly trying to figure out if this was some kind of trap. After what felt like forever, she climbed down from the tree branch. Her movements were careful and graceful, like a tiny dancer. When she reached the ground, she was even smaller than Robert had thought. She barely came up to the height of the grass. She approached the apple slice cautiously, never taking her eyes off Robert. When she finally reached it, she broke off a small piece and took a tiny bite. Her face lit up with joy. It was clear she hadn't tasted anything this good in a long time. Robert watched as she carefully broke the slice in half, wrapping one piece in what looked like a large leaf from her pack. She was saving some for later. "What's your name?" Robert asked softly. The girl looked up at him and made some sounds that didn't sound like any language he knew. Then she pointed to herself and said something that sounded like Zira. "Zira," Robert repeated, and she nodded with a small smile. "I'm Robert," he said, pointing to himself. "Robert," she tried, her voice like tiny wind chimes. As they looked at each other in the growing darkness, Robert realized his life had just changed forever. Here in his own backyard, under his own apple trees, he had discovered something impossible. And instead of being afraid, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt needed. The next morning, Robert woke up wondering if the whole thing had been a dream. But when he looked out his bedroom window, he could see tiny footprints in the soft dirt near his apple trees. His heart raced with excitement. It had really happened. He quickly made his way to the backyard, moving as quietly as possible. He didn't want to scare Zira if she was still around. "Zira," he called softly, "little one, are you here?" At first, there was no answer. Then he heard a small voice coming from under his garden bench. "Robert." Robert knelt down and peered under the wooden bench. There she was, curled up in a tiny ball, using fallen leaves as a blanket. She looked even smaller in the morning light, and he could see that she was shivering. "You slept out here all night?" Robert asked, feeling terrible that she had been cold. Zira crawled out from under the bench, brushing leaves from her silver hair. She looked up at him with those enormous dark eyes and nodded. "You must be freezing," Robert said, "and probably hungry too." At the mention of food, Zira's tiny stomach made a growling sound that was barely audible. She looked embarrassed and wrapped her arms around her middle. Robert smiled gently. "Wait right here. I'll be back in just a minute." He hurried into his house and returned with a small piece of bread, some honey, and a bottle cap filled with warm milk. He set everything down near Zira and watched as her eyes grew even wider. "This is all for me?" she asked in her wine chime voice, mixing some English words with sounds from her own language. "Of course," Robert said. "You're my guest." As Zira ate, Robert studied her more carefully. Her skin really was blue, but it had a soft, pearl-like glow to it. Her clothes were definitely made from plant materials, but they were sewn together with incredible skill. Everything about her was perfectly proportioned. "Just tiny, Zira," Robert said carefully. "Where do you come from?" She looked up from her breakfast and pointed toward the sky. Then she made swooshing sounds and moved her hands like something flying and crashing down. "Your ship crashed?" Robert asked. Zira nodded sadly and began drawing in the dirt with her finger. She drew what looked like a small oval shape with wings. Then she drew it falling from the sky and hitting the ground with little explosion marks around it. "When did this happen?" Robert asked. Zira held up her fingers, trying to show him. She made marks in the dirt, counting. Robert counted along with her. 21 marks, 3 weeks ago, Robert said, and Zira nodded. "You've been living outside for 3 weeks. Robert felt his heart break a little more. No wonder she looked so thin and tired. Zira began talking in her own language, making gestures and drawing more pictures in the dirt. Robert couldn't understand the words, but he could see the story she was telling. She drew more tiny figures like herself, showing him that she wasn't alone in the universe. She drew what looked like a larger ship and pointed to herself, then to the small crashed ship she had been sent out to explore. He realized. "You're a scout," Robert said, and she nodded enthusiastically. Then her expression became sad again. She drew lines connecting her small ship to the big one, then crossed them out. She couldn't contact her people. She was stranded. Your communication system is broken, Robert said, understanding. Zero looked surprised that he knew that word. She nodded and made more gestures, showing him that parts of her ship were damaged. Robert felt a wave of protectiveness wash over him. This tiny being was completely alone, millions of miles from home, surviving on stolen apples and sleeping under garden benches. Zira, he said gently, you can't keep living like this. It's getting colder every day. Winter is coming. She tilted her head, not understanding the word winter. Robert tried to explain by shivering and making it snow with his fingers. Zira's eyes grew wide with fear when she understood. I have an idea, Robert said. What if you stay with me? I have a greenhouse where I grow plants in the winter. It's warm and safe. And there's plenty of food. Zira stared at him for a long moment. She seemed to be trying to decide if she could trust him. I won't hurt you, Robert promised. And I won't tell anyone about you. It will be our secret. The tiny girl looked around the garden, then back at Robert's kind face. Slowly, she nodded. Robert felt happier than he had in months. Come on, let me show you. He led her to his greenhouse, a glass building where he grew vegetables and flowers year-round. Inside, it was warm and humid, filled with the rich smell of earth and growing things. This could be your home, Robert said. I can set up a little space just for you. Zira walked around in wonder, touching the leaves of plants she had never seen before. Then she stopped at his tomato plants and made excited sounds. She pointed to them and then to herself, chattering in her own language. You know about plants? Robert asked. Zira nodded eagerly. She went to one of his struggling pepper plants and gently touched its leaves. She made soft sounds, almost like she was singing to it. Then she showed Robert how the plant's roots needed more space and how the soil was to dry in one spot. Robert watched in amazement as she demonstrated what the plant needed. Everything she showed him made perfect sense. You're not just a scout, he said with wonder. You're a plant expert. Zira beamed with pride. As they worked together that first morning, Robert began to realize that maybe he could help Zira as much as she could help him. She needed shelter, food, and safety. He needed purpose, companionship, and someone to share his love of gardening with. Neither of them had family nearby. Neither of them had anyone who really understood them. But maybe, just maybe, they could take care of each other. 2 weeks had passed since Zira moved into Robert's greenhouse, and their daily routine had become something beautiful. Every morning, Robert would bring her breakfast on a tiny plate he had made from a bottle cap. Every evening, they would sit together and watch the sunset through the glass walls. But it was during the day that the real magic happened. Zira had knowledge about plants that amazed Robert. She could tell just by touching a leaf if a plant was getting too much water or not enough sunlight. She knew which plants liked to grow near each other and which ones should be kept apart. How do you know all this? Robert asked one afternoon as they worked together. Zira smiled and pointed to the sky. Then she made growing motions with her hands, showing him plants much bigger and stranger than anything on Earth. On your planet, plants are different, Robert asked. Very different, Zira said in her small voice. Her English was getting better every day. Some plants tall like your houses. Some plants glow in dark like stars. Robert's eyes widened with wonder. Glowing plants, Zira nodded excitedly. She drew pictures in the soil of her potted plants, showing him trees with leaves that sparkled and flowers that gave off their own light. I wish I could see them, Robert said softly. A sad look crossed Zira's tiny face. I wish too. She whispered to cheer her up. Robert had been building things for her. He made a tiny bed from cotton and matchboxes. He created a small table from a piece of wood and for toothpicks. He even made her a little ladder so she could climb up to reach the higher plant shelves. Zira was so grateful for everything. She would thank him over and over, sometimes in English and sometimes in her own musical language. But she gave back too, under her care. Robert's plants were growing better than they ever had before. His tomatoes were bigger and juicier. His flowers bloomed brighter and lasted longer. His vegetable garden was producing twice as much food as usual. My neighbors keep asking what my secret is, Robert told her with a chuckle. If only they knew. The thought of other people finding out about Zira always made both of them nervous. Robert had to be very careful. He started shopping for extra food, buying tiny portions of everything. When the store clerk asked why he needed such small amounts, he said he was trying a new diet. He also had to explain why he was spending so much time in his greenhouse. When his neighbor Mrs. Chen asked about it over the fence, Robert said he was working on a special plant project. You're always out there now, she said with curiosity. What are you growing? Something very rare, Robert answered, which was certainly true. The hardest part was hiding Zira when people came to visit. Robert's daughter Lisa called every week and sometimes dropped by. Without warning, she lived in the next town over and worried about her father living alone. One afternoon, Lisa knocked on the door just as Robert and Zira were examining his rose bushes. Dad, I brought you some soup, Lisa called from the front door. Robert's heart jumped. Quick, Zira, hide. The tiny girl ran faster than Robert had ever seen anyone move. She disappeared into a small flower pot just as Lisa walked into the backyard. There you are, Lisa said, giving her father a hug. You look good, Dad, really good. You seem happier lately. Robert tried to act normal, but his eyes kept drifting to the flower pot where Zira was hiding. I've been enjoying my gardening more. That's all. Lisa looked around the greenhouse with amazement. Dad, your plants look incredible. I've never seen them so healthy. And are those new varieties? I don't remember seeing those flowers before. Robert's heart pounded. Some of the plants were indeed different now. Thanks to Zira's special care techniques, I've been experimenting, he said weakly. Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up, Lisa said. Maybe you should write a book about gardening. You could be famous. The idea of fame terrified Robert. The last thing he wanted was attention. After Lisa left, he found Zira still curled up in the flower pot, shaking. It's okay, he told her. Gently, she's gone now. She seemed nice, Zira said in a small voice. Like you? That's my daughter, Robert explained. I raised her to be kind. Zira looked thoughtful. You have family. You're not alone like me. Robert sat down beside her tiny form. Actually, I have been alone. Lisa has her own life, her own family. I only see her once a week. Most days, it was just me and the plants. And now, Zira asked. Now I have you, Robert said with a warm smile. You're my family too. Zira's eyes filled with tears that sparkled like tiny diamonds. Really? Really? Robert confirmed as the weeks went on. Their friendship deepened. Zira would tell Robert stories about her home planet while they worked. She described cities that floated in the air and oceans that were purple instead of blue. She talked about her family, her parents who were also plant specialists, and her younger brother who was still learning. Do you miss them? Robert asked. Every day. Zira admitted. But being here with you makes missing less hurt. Robert understood exactly what she meant. For the first time since his wife died 3 years ago, he didn't feel lonely anymore. But their peaceful routine was about to be interrupted. Neither of them realized that Robert's happiness was becoming too obvious to hide. His improved mood, his thriving garden, and his mysterious behavior were starting to raise questions. Questions that would soon put their secret friendship at risk. The storm came without warning on a Tuesday night in November. Robert had never seen lightning so bright or heard thunder so loud. Rain pounded against the greenhouse windows like thousands of tiny hammers. But it wasn't the storm outside that worried Robert. It was what was happening to Zira. She had been acting strange all day, moving slower than usual and staying close to her little bed. At first, Robert thought she was just tired, but as the storm grew stronger, Zira grew weaker. Something's wrong, she whispered, her tiny voice barely audible over the rain. Feel heavy. Robert knelt beside her matchbox bed, his heart full of worry. Zira's normally glowing blue skin had turned pale, almost gray. Her breathing was shallow and quick. "What can I do?" Robert asked frantically. "Tell me how to help." "You." But Zira could barely keep her eyes open. She curled up in a tiny ball, shivering despite the warm greenhouse air. Robert had read about this in his science books years ago. Some alien life forms might not handle Earth's atmospheric pressure changes well. The storm was creating pressure drops that Zira's small body couldn't manage. "Hold on, little one," Robert said, gently covering her with a soft piece of cotton. "I'm going to figure this out." He spent the next hour trying everything he could think of. He moved her to different parts of the greenhouse, adjusted the temperature, even tried playing soft music to calm her. Nothing worked. Zira was getting worse. By midnight, Robert was truly scared. Zira hadn't moved or spoken in over an hour. Her breathing was so faint he had to put his ear close to her tiny chest to make sure she was still alive. Robert knew he needed help, but who could he call? Who would believe him? Who would help a tiny alien girl without trying to take her away for experiments? Then he remembered his daughter Lisa. She was a nurse. She had dedicated her life to helping people. If anyone would understand, it would be her. With shaking hands, Robert picked up his phone and called Lisa's number. "Dad," Lisa's sleepy voice answered. "It's midnight. Are you okay?" "Lisa, I need you to come over right now," Robert said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I can't explain over the phone, but someone very important to me is dying." "What? Dad, what are you talking about? Who's dying?" "Please just come," Robert begged, "and bring your medical bag. I know this sounds crazy, but I need you to trust me." Lisa heard the desperation in her father's voice. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. While he waited for Lisa, Robert sat beside Zira's bed, talking to her even though she couldn't respond. "You're going to be okay," he whispered. "My daughter is coming. She's very smart, and she helps people for a living. She'll know what to do." When Lisa's car pulled into the driveway, Robert felt a mix of relief and terror. He was about to share the most incredible secret of his life. Lisa hurried through the rain to the front door, carrying her nurse's bag. "Dad, what's going on? You're scaring me." Robert led her straight to the greenhouse without explaining. "Before you see what I'm about to show you, I need you to promise me something." "What kind of promise?" "Promise you won't call anyone. Promise you won't tell anyone. Promise you'll help me protect someone who needs our help." Lisa looked worried. "Dad, are you feeling all right? Have you been taking your medications?" "I'm fine." "Lisa, I'm better than I've been in years. But I need that promise." Lisa studied her father's face. She could see he was completely serious. "Okay, Dad, I promise." Robert took a deep breath and led her to the small corner where Zira's tiny home was set up. He pointed to the matchbox bed. "Her name is Zira," he said quietly. Lisa looked where her father was pointing and gasped. At first, she thought it was a doll, but then she saw the tiny chest rising and falling with breath. "Is that?" Lisa's voice trailed off in shock. "She's from another planet," Robert said simply. "Her ship crashed 3 weeks ago. She's been living with me, and we've become very close. But this storm is making her sick, and I don't know how to help her." Lisa stared in amazement for a full minute. Then her nurse training kicked in. She knelt down and opened her medical bag. "What are her symptoms?" she asked. As if treating tiny aliens was something she did every day, Robert felt a wave of love. For his daughter, she was handling this better than he had hoped. She said she felt heavy when the storm started. Robert explained. Her skin changed color, and her breathing became shallow. "I think it has something to do with the atmospheric pressure." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. If her body is adapted to different atmospheric conditions, sudden pressure changes could be dangerous." She pulled out a small instrument and gently examined Zira. The tiny girl stirred slightly at the touch but didn't wake up. "Her pulse is rapid but steady," Lisa said. "Her breathing is labored, but her airways seem clear." "Can you help her?" Robert asked desperately. Lisa thought for a moment. "I think so. We need to create a more stable environment for her." "Do you have any large glass jars?" Robert nodded and ran to get one from his kitchen. when he returned. Lisa was already preparing a small oxygen mask made from plastic wrap and tubing. "We're going to create a controlled atmosphere chamber," Lisa explained as she worked. "This should help stabilize the pressure around her." Working together, father and daughter carefully moved Zira into the glass jar, along with her bed and a tiny oxygen supply. Within minutes, Zira's color began to improve. "It's working," Robert said with relief. Lisa sat back and looked at her father with new eyes. "Dad, how long has she been living here?" "About a month now," Robert admitted. "She's been helping me with my plants. That's why my garden looks so good." "And you've been taking care of her all this time by yourself?" Robert nodded. "She needed help, and I needed someone to care about. We've been good for each other." Lisa looked at the tiny sleeping figure in the glass jar. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "And you probably saved her life by taking her in." As the storm finally began to come outside, three unlikely friends sat together in the warm greenhouse, watching over each other through the night. 3 days after the storm, Zira was back to her normal self, chattering happily as she helped Robert and Lisa tend to the greenhouse plants. The crisis had brought all three of them closer together, creating an unusual but loving family. Lisa had started visiting every day after work, fascinated by Zira's knowledge and charmed by her personality. She brought tiny gifts, a thimble that became a perfect bathtub, silk thread for Zira to weave into clothes, and small beads that Zira used as decorations for her home. "I can't believe I was worried about Dad being lonely," Lisa told Zira one evening. "You've been taking better care of him than I ever could." But their peaceful routine was about to change in a way none of them expected. Robert had been working on something in secret during his visits to the library. He had been researching electronics and communication systems. He wanted to help Zira repair her ship's radios so she could contact her people. Late one night, while Zira slept peacefully in her glass home, Robert showed Lisa what he had been working on. "I think I understand how her communication system works," he whispered, showing Lisa pages of notes and drawings. "If we can find the right parts, we might be able to fix it." Lisa looked at the complex diagrams. "Dad, this is incredible work. But are you sure we should do this?" Robert's heart ached as he considered the question. "She misses her family, Lisa. Every day I see the sadness in her eyes when she talks about home. It's not fair to keep her here just because we love having her with us." The next morning, Robert and Lisa told Zira about their plan. Her reaction surprised them both. Instead of jumping with joy, Zira looked confused and a little scared. "You want me to leave?" she asked in a small voice. "No, little one," Robert said quickly. "We want you to have the choice. Your family must be worried sick about you." Zira was quiet for a long time. Then she climbed up to Robert's shoulder and hugged his neck as tightly as her tiny arms could manage. "I love my family," she whispered. "But I love you and Lisa too. Earth is my home now." Robert felt tears in his eyes. "Zira, you need to think about this carefully. If we contact your people, they'll come for you. You might not get another chance to go home." Over the next week, the three of them worked together to repair Zira's ship. It had crashed in the woods behind Robert's house, and they carefully brought the damaged pieces back to the greenhouse. The ship was beautiful, made of a silver metal that seemed to glow with its own light. It was no bigger than a microwave, but incredibly complex inside. "This technology is amazing," Lisa said as they worked. "It's like nothing I've ever seen." Zira smiled proudly. "My people very smart. We travel between stars for many generations." As they repaired the communication system, Zira told them more about her world. She described floating cities, purple oceans, and plants that sang in the wind. But she also talked about missing Robert's daily stories and Lisa's gentle hands when she helped with her medical care. "On my planet, we live with many people," Zira explained. "But here, I have special friendship. Just 3 of us, very precious." The day finally came when the communication system was ready. Robert's hand shook as he helped Zira activate it. Strange sounds filled the greenhouse as the device came to life. Then they heard voices. Other beings like Zira, speaking in their musical language. When they heard Zira's voice responding, The excitement was overwhelming. Zira spoke to her people. For nearly an hour, tears of joy streaming down her tiny face. Robert and Lisa couldn't understand the words, but they could hear the love and relief in every voice when the conversation ended. Zira looked at her human friends with mixed emotions. "They come for me tomorrow," she said quietly. "Big ship will land and field behind house at sunset." That night, none of them slept well. They spent the time together, sharing memories and making promises to never forget each other. "Will we ever see you again?" Lisa asked, holding Zira gently in her palms. "I don't know," Zira admitted, "but I will never forget kindness you showed me. I will tell my people about humans who have good hearts." The next evening, as the sun began to set, a soft humming sound filled the air. A ship appeared in the sky, beautiful and graceful. Landing silently in the field behind Robert's house, 3 figures emerged from the ship, similar to Zira but taller. When they saw her, they ran forward with obvious joy and relief. The reunion was beautiful and heartbreaking to watch. Zira hugged her family while they spoke rapidly in their own language. Then she turned back to Robert and Lisa. "I must choose now," she said, her voice full of emotion. Robert knelt down beside her. "Whatever you choose, we'll understand. We just want you to be happy." Zira looked at her family, then at her human friends, then back again. The decision was clearly tearing her apart. Finally, she spoke to her family in their language. They listened, carefully, occasionally looking at Robert and Lisa with curiosity and gratitude. Then one of them, who seemed to be Zira's mother, approached Robert. She was about 2 feet tall, with the same glowing blue skin and kind eyes as Zira. In careful English, she said, "You save our daughter. You give her love and home. We are grateful forever." "She saved us too," Robert replied. "She brought joy back into our lives." Zira's mother smiled. "She tell us about your kindness, about your plants and your gentle hearts. She want to stay, but she also want to see family." Then she said something that surprised everyone. "We come back," she announced. "Every season, we visit Earth. Zira can live with both families." Zira's face lit up with pure happiness. "Really, really," her mother confirmed. "Earth is a special place now. Place where our daughter found second family." As Zira prepared to leave with her people, she gave Robert and Lisa gifts from her world. To Robert, she gave seeds from her home planet, seeds that would grow into flowers that glowed in the dark. To Lisa, she gave a small crystal that would always remind her of their friendship. "I come back in spring," Zira promised as she hugged them goodbye. "I bring more stories and more plant wisdom." The ship rose silently into the night sky, carrying Zira home, but leaving behind the promise of return. 6 months later, Robert's garden was famous throughout the neighborhood. The glowing flowers that bloomed at night drew visitors from miles away. Robert and Lisa would smile at each other, knowing the secret behind the magic. And on warm spring evenings, they would sit in the greenhouse together, watching the sky and waiting for a small humming sound that would signal the return of their extraordinary friend. Their little family would be complete once again.